On episode 11, I will be interviewing Mr. Gnaneswar from the Madras Crocodile Bank Trust. On this episode, we will be talking about snake bites, which is currently the most deadly tropical disease around the world. Over 1 million people have lost their lives due to snake bites in India over the last 2 decades. So, my first question is, what was the idea behind the Madras Crocodile Bank Trust?
So the Madras Crocodile Bank Trust was established as a zoo back in 70s to ideally conserve critically endangered reptiles, especially crocodilians back then. As you may be aware, during that course of time, a lot of crocodiles were being hunted or were being poisoned in the rivers. So the intention was to help conservation breeding to happen and then sort of release them back into the wild to rebuild the population. That was the main intention behind the Croc Bank's establishment, and it also was the center for herpetology, where ideally not just crocs but also other reptiles could people could study about it and have them in captivity. And a dedicated center by a private entity was not really available back then.
MCPT also works on snakebite mitigation. In the 21st century, India has lost over 1 million people due to snake bites. Why exactly are snake bites so common in India?
Yeah, Croc Bank has been working on snake bites, especially snake bite mitigation, for the last, let's say, what, 40 years now. And this has come through several interventions. Like our founder, Romulus Whittaker, was one of the first persons to see this issue as a really big problematic issue across the country. And even though a lot of people knew that snakebite was really a big problem, very little has been done to work towards it, especially on the non-clinical aspects, which is not what happens outside, or not usually what happens outside the hospital. So here, what happens in India, or let's say even in several other tropical countries, is that snakes coexist or sort of live close to human populations. So this is because of the availability of food items such as rodents or insects or lizards and all. So what happens while in this model is that people and snakes live very closely to each other, and snakes being animals that are usually very shy and very stealthy in nature, um, uh, are often stepped upon or often held without any caution, and people then get bitten by snakes. And with countries like India, where a majority of the population live in rural or semi-urban areas, where some of the medically important or some of the major venomous snakes live, uh, cause a huge conflict between people and snakes in the region. That is one of the reasons why people get bitten a lot, and we lose a lot of lives, almost 60,000 lives every year due to snake bite. And we don't know the ecological impact this has because people also kill snakes a lot. We really don't know how many snakes are killed or what does that do to the ecosystems there. So yeah, so combined with the multiple factors which we might later discuss on the podcast, it adds up to the huge burden of snakebite in India. And let me just quote you right here: it's the biggest human-wildlife conflict, and it's so big that it is actually a disease. It's considered as a disease by the World Health Organization.
So, why does snakebite have such a high mortality rate in India?
Good question. I think the biggest factors is that the lack of awareness among people. For example, once when somebody is bitten by a snake, several places, especially in rural India, people believe that the cure for snakebite is found at a faith healing or a traditional healing places. This is because of generations of misinformation being spread out through mass media and through a lot of books and all. That is the reason why a majority of the deaths happen outside of hospitals, mainly because people don't reach or don't go to hospitals due to misbeliefs. Secondly, there are other factors such as understaffed health systems in where people are admitted. For example, in several parts of country, the first access to healthcare is at primary health centers. But majority of the primary health centers are not equipped enough to treat a snake bite or do not have the doctors who would understand how to treat a snake bite with the limited medication that they have. so is the problem even in secondary care. And also, by the time a person reaches a good hospital where they can be treated by snakebite, it's already 3 to 4 hours, which is which is what the time is a very crucial thing. We call it a golden hour, but if somebody can reach a hospital as soon as they can, they'll be treated easily. In addition to these two factors, there are other factors such as improper first aid, where people cut and people try to tie something against it, or for the fact that there is not sufficient antivenom. Antivenom is a cure for snake bite, and some other reasons which are mostly anthropological in nature. But the first two reasons are the biggest factors for why we see a huge amount of snake bite deaths in India.
Okay, and which species contribute the most to snake bite deaths and what makes them so dangerous?
It's to be honest, we term something called as medically important snakes. So there are several venomous snakes across country. I believe that there are over 60 venomous snakes across country out of the 350 plus snakes that we have. Among these 60, there are maybe 2 dozens or under which are medically important snakes that are capable enough to cause a human death or severe adverse reactions. And among these 24 species, we have something called as the big four venomous snakes, which is basically a Russell's viper, a saw-scaled viper, common krait, and a spectacled cobra, which earlier are supposed to be causing the majority of snakebite deaths in India. In addition to these four species, there are also other medically important species that are geographically found, such as the kraits in the northeast, the monocled cobra, the kraits in the west, and the such like saw-scale viper. All these are equally significant when it comes to snakes that can cause human deaths in India. But yeah, but something that we call the big four venomous snakes has been the baseline against which the antivenom has been developed for in India.
So, is it possible to identify venomous snakes from non-venomous snakes?
I mean, if you're talking about with respect to bite sites and all, maybe not. You can never identify any snake from each other by looking at the way they bite. But critically answering, of course, you can differentiate any snake from each other by looking at the photos or looking at the scalation and all. However, in hospitals, doctors don't use any of these ID characters or anything like that. They usually go for clinical symptoms. That means that, for example, if a non-venomous snake bites somebody, a doctor will not treat them with antivenom because antivenom is only for venomous snake bites. Using antivenom for non-venomous snake bites can cause adverse reactions in the body. So the doctor waits for the patient to develop certain kind of symptoms, or if the patient is already admitted with certain kind of symptoms, they ensure that these symptoms are caused because of snake bite. Some common symptoms are ptosis, which means that eyes unable to control eyes, or bleeding from the mouth and from any oral openings and all. So these signs, they look at it and they say, okay, this is a viper or this is a krait or cobra. So we should treat them so and so. That's how for the doctors it is. They treat you symptomatically. Whereas for herpetologists, we can identify snakes based upon the photographs, the visual documentation, the scalation, and all that. But by the bite marks or by any other non-indicative keys, it's really hard to tell what's a venomous snake and what's a non-venomous snake.
And what should an individual do if they come into close contact with a snake?
Uh, if close contact with snake, let's say if they've bumped into a snake in a closed area, in a closed room, the best is to make sure that we don't surround the snake. It's always good to sort of find ourselves a corner and let the snake, like, gently help the snake in going to the opposite direction where there is probably a door or a window or something like that. And then, or call for help, like a rescuer or a forest department staff or somebody like that. You should never try to catch the snake or kill it or sort of throw anything over it. All that will only lead to even more consequences. If a person has come across a snake in a not so open area, like an open field, then it's better to take a few steps back and just let the snake move by itself. any close encounters, trying to click pictures or going closer to it would only agitate the snake and try to bite you. So these two are the important things to remember if at all somebody comes close to a snake. Leaving them alone is the best possible thing that you could do to avoid a snake bite.
What are some of the most common misconceptions about snakes in India?
Um, these are so. For example, there are a lot of beliefs and myths that revolve around snakes, and most of this are geographically different. For example, some beliefs which are in Gujarat are not the same beliefs which are in Tamil Nadu. One of the most common belief that people misbelief that people believe in is the fact that snakes take revenge, which is not really true. Snakes do not take revenge. They do not have that capabilities to identify somebody and take revenge. Really, it's only a myth. And or for the fact that snakes drink milk, and in a snake, I mean, in Nag Panchami and all, people go offer milk and offer eggs and all. Several species of snakes do not really even eat eggs. They forget milk. Only if an animal is extremely dehydrated or extremely hungry is when they can reach out to such kind of food. But otherwise, in their natural diet, they neither drink milk nor they eat eggs. Very few snakes eat eggs. And along with this, there are several other myths. Like some people believe that snakes bite you only on the eyes, certain species. And then there is the fact that snake charmers can make a snake dance. It's not really a snake really dancing to a tune. Those snakes can hear, but not really hear like how we can. They move to the movement of the flute or of the mouth organ that the charmer has, and they sort of that's how they are. They usually have their eyes locked up on anything that moves in front of them, and they keep moving around it, which makes people believe that they're dancing to the tune of a charmer. And and these are some of the common myths that revolve around snakes. And yeah, but again, every state or every geographic region, every tribe has its own concepts about or myths about snakes.
Wait, I'll rephrase the question, sorry. So, what is the role of awareness in reducing snakebite mortality? And what are some outreach and capacity building programs FCPT are working on?
The role of outreach is very important in this scenario. I'll tell you the extent of the problem. For example, like I mentioned, majority of the population that live close to snakes are very unaware of what snake bite is. They also don't know what snakes are, and they have a lot of misbeliefs around the snakes that they in the community. So, firstly, people don't want to go to hospital, or people don't know about a medical assistance that is available in a hospital. And then, secondly, even after they go to hospitals, several hospitals are under-equipped to treat as snakebite cases. So they keep referring to a higher facility, which causes problems for victims. Thirdly, this is the point that I think we might talk a little later in the podcast, but snake's venom differs geographically. For example, the same species of snake, for example, the Russel's viper in South India is different to Russel's viper in Central India and to the North India. The venom components are differing extremely. So this is causing an underrepresented anti-venom production. To give you some background, anti-venom is made from the venom of the snakes. For example, you take venom from snakes, you inject it into a horse, the horse develops antibodies, and you take the antibodies from the horse and inject it back to a person for anti-venom production. The catch here is the venom, which is 90% of venom that is demanded for this anti-venom industry across India, is collected only from two districts in southern Tamil Nadu, which are in Changalpet and Kanchipuram districts around the clock bank. And here, what happens is that because the venom is only collected from one region, the anti-venom, which is prepared for the rest of the country, is actually prepared against venom, which is not available in North India or Central India. Like certain components are not available there in the venom there. So what it causes is that it causes a very underrepresentative anti-venom across India. So one of the clinical observations that are made by doctors in West Bengal is it takes a lot more of vials and a lot more of care to treat a snakebite case in West Bengal against a snakebite case in Tamil Nadu. This is because the antivenom is not efficient enough to cure the snake bites there. So this also is one of the biggest factor for antivenom. And also, antivenom comes with several other problems, such as they don't have clinical trials, they have issues with dosages, and against to all this, there are problems with claiming compensation. After a person dies, there is very little understanding about how to claim compensation, and it differs from state to state. So all this is such a huge complex of issues that happen after a snake bite. Like right after a snake bite, a person is in a world of troubles. The only way to avoid this troubles are by preventing a snake bite. This is where outreach plays an important role in targeting all these effects, in such as prevention of snake bite. Okay, but if accidentally somebody is bitten by snake bite, somebody is bitten by snake, so what should they do? And what would that, if at all somebody dies because of snake bite, how to claim for compensation? All this are addressed by outreach activities across the country. And in addition to outreach, we also do capacity building programs. And capacity building programs are basically training the frontline workers, mostly forest department, fire department, village health nurses, district educators. So all these are important to sort of sensitize and strengthen the capacities within a government or within a district, which will help in mitigating snakes and snake bites in the future.
How is FCPT utilizing technology to mitigate snakebite in India?
We've been working with a couple of our organizations and organizational partners across India, and we are doing a bunch of activities. For example, one of the most notable activity that we have done along with an organization called as Indian Snakes is basically developed a mobile application called as Sarpa, or the Serpent. And this mobile application currently, which is in full scale working in Kerala, what it does is it's like an Ola Uber service for a snake rescuer. So if you have a situation of a snake or inside your house, you can open Serpa and you can find out who is the rescuer closer to you, and you can call them up and they'll come and they'll pick up the snake and they'll release it back into the surroundings or back into the wild. It's one of the biggest interventions. Sarpa also has several other features, such as able to locate hospitals which have anti-venom, able to identify snakes, has a offline guide of snakes, and important phone numbers to call to, and educational materials. Similarly, we have done this for nationwide platform called a Serpent, which is still at a beta stage right now. We are working on it, and we are right now planning to expand a similar project in Tamil Nadu as well. It's one of the biggest technological interventions that we did, in addition to using open data kits and softwares to collect data across India, which are mostly epidemiological and which are mostly to understand the problem of snakebite in India. So we have been using technology to both understand the problem and also to provide the solutions.
So can you elaborate a bit on the research on venom you are doing?
Yeah. So Indian Institute of Sciences has a lab called as Evolutionary Venomics Lab, led by Dr. Karthik Sunaga. So what they do is they're studying the geographic variations in venom, which means that within the same species or across several species, how the venom is changing and what factors are possibly causing that. And how we are helping them is by helping them out in catching snakes and helping them in getting the venom to them. And they do the lab works. They make sure that they test all these venoms against anti-venoms that are available in the market and see which is performing well, which is not performing well. And this sort of research has helped us to enlighten, mostly in the recent times, to understand how big of a problem this geographic variation of venom is, and the fact that we need slightly more representative of venoms from across the country to actually address the quality of anti-venom in India. And the lab at the Institute of Sciences has been predominantly working in this for a very long time. And several publications have come out which are quite groundbreaking in India to address the problem of snakebite and geographic variation of venom.
So what are some other initiatives taken by MCPT to tackle snake bites?
I think one of the biggest points that I missed out throughout my talk is that the biggest challenge for snakebite in India is policy. Like, to understand, it's a neglected tropical disease and it's a neglected issue. across the country. So you need uh, to make sure the government is fully aware of the extent of the problem and makes better policy in it. So what Crocbank does, or what I do for a lot of our time, is that we help governments, we assist governments in establishing better policy frameworks, which would not only address the problem of snakebite at clinical level, but also at non-clinical levels, such as compensation plans, such as anti-venom manufacturing, such as venom production and a prevention model across the country. This is one of our major activities where we are sitting with government of India, government of Tamil Nadu, government of Karnataka, in sort of identifying the local issues and sort of coming up with solutions. So Crocbank hosts the biggest venom collection center in India, called as Irregular Snake Catchers Industrial Cooperative Society, which is a society of a specific and very remarkable tribes called as the Irregular. And these people have been working. These people have been known to catch snakes for several decades now, and for several centuries, rather, I suppose. And one of the things that they used to do back in the British era was that they used to catch snakes for the leather industries and all. They used to catch snakes, they used to kill it, and they used to sort of help the leather industry get going. Since independence and since the Wildlife Protection Act, catching snakes and killing them for any purposes was banned, literally illegal. So since then, they didn't have really like a job. So what Rom did back then was that he helped them in establishing a society called as the Society for Catching Snakes for milking venom out of it. The venom was then used for the anti-venom manufacturing in India. So they were. This was a very novel progress, because it not only made sure that the snakes are not killed, it also gave a livelihood to a tribal community while supporting the entire anti-venom industry in India. This was a very big move, and which only helped us in progressing the anti-venom manufacturing in India. However, since 70s or 80s, the way of catching snakes, the way of milking venom from them, has been more or likely the same. Even though the newer standards of catching and milking snakes have come up, and even though there are new technologies that would help in preserving the quality better, they were never really adopted. So what now was happening is that we believe that the venom that is being produced here is not of great quality. So what we are doing is assisting the government of Tamil Nadu in establishing a better serpentarium for rivers, where not only the venom quality is preserved, but also they can hire more rulers in working in this project. So it's one of our a long-term goal is to make sure that the venom production unit in India, or a venom production unit here, gets only better with time, and we'll be able to produce more of quality of anti-venom, more of quality of venom, and continue to do so for the rest of the time.
Beyond human wildlife conflict, what are some of the major threats faced by snakes in India?
When it comes to human snake conflict, very few of us talk about the impacts that is caused on snakes, and that's quite upsetting for us, especially as conservationists. So what happens? One of the biggest threats for snakes in India, majority of snakes in India, is retaliatory killing. Like the fear itself that is among the communities, that if they see a snake, they should kill it. So that's one of the biggest threat for snakes in India, is people just, whenever they spot it, they kill it. That's it. And secondly, there is, of course, deforestation, and which is further causing from snakes to move from places of forests to slightly more urbanized areas, and then again resulting in the same conflict. There's also the fact that snakes are one of the major victims of roadkills. While snakes cross roads in the evenings or in the nights for warmth and all, because the tar roads give perfect warmth for snakes. So they come, they bask on the tar roads, and a vehicle runs over them. So snakes are one of the biggest victims for road kills. In addition to retaliatory killings, the road kills, and deforestation, there are other factors too, which are not a big contributors to snake deaths or snake or again snake conservation. But these are some of the major factors that play a role in conserving snakes.
So my final question for you today is that how can an individual contribute to the Crocbank and snakebite mitigation as a whole?
Several again, depends upon the individual's capabilities and understandings here. If a person is into the field of academics and sciences, they could take up snake bites as an issue of their interest and sort of research about it. And if it's for mostly for common people, the best thing they can do is support activities like ours in any capacities that they can. Or and then whenever they see a snake, they should rather think about calling a rescuer and mitigating that situation there, other than trying to kill it or do anything about it. And students can consider this as a career option in the future, because very few work on snake conservation or snake bite mitigation in India. It's a really big problem in India, and it would only require more and more people working towards it. And educators or school teachers or institutions can consider talking about snakes in their curriculums or in their activities to children, because we've seen that in children it's more or likely that we can change their mindsets. And if this is for and for several people who can work on producing funds or raising funds, then they should help out activities like ours, which already are very underfunded due to the lack of interest between governments, uh, which will help us to sort of conduct more outreach programs, help more farmers in understanding the problem and all. So everybody has a role to play. Depending upon the walk of life they are from, they could contribute towards problems in their own capacities.
That's great. So that was my final question for today. So thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure speaking to you.
You're welcome, Ashish. It's my pleasure too.